lot of people have asked me, why did you call this ministry Barleyfield? And I'd like to take a minute to answer that question because the name is significant to me for three specific reasons. And here's the first one. There are a number of very deeply held convictions that I have that underlie the strategy of this ministry. So there are reasons why we do what we do here, which may not be obvious to the casual observer. And one of those convictions is that the church is called to defend the truth. Now you may say, that's obvious, but let's hear the words of Jude. He says, "Beloved, while I was very diligent to write to you concerning our common salvation, I found it necessary to write to you, exhorting you to contend earnestly for the faith which was once for all delivered to the saints." But over the last 100 years or so, from liberal Christianity, which is no Christianity at all, to seeker-sensitive Christianity, to the prosperity gospel, we've lost our confidence in the foundational truths of the gospel to save the lost and to make disciples of them. And in so doing, I believe we've given up the most powerful weapon that we have. So, I believe there is a need in our generation for men and women who know their Bibles, who know their doctrine, and who are willing to stand for the truth, regardless of how much opposition there is. And there is a powerful picture of that I feel the Lord gave me some time ago in a story that we read in 1 Chronicles chapter 11. And in that chapter, the writer is telling us about David's mighty men, and I'm going to read verses 12 to 14 to you. Eleazar, the son of Dodo the Ahohite, was one of the three mighty men. He was with David at Pasdammon. Now there the Philistines were gathered for battle, and there was a piece of ground full of barley. So the people fled from the Philistines, but they stationed themselves in the middle of that field, defended it, and killed the Philistines. So the Lord brought about a great victory. There in that barley field, when all God's people were fleeing in the face of the enemy, these two men, Eleazar and David, took their stand in the middle of that field, and come what may, they said, it's going to end here. And it turned out to be one of the greatest and most miraculous victories in the history of warfare. These two men defeated the Philistine army. Why? Because they trusted God and they were willing to take their stand come what may. They knew that that land was their land. That was not the Philistines' land. God had given it to the Israelites by covenant. And these two men were zealous for the glory of God and for His kingdom. And so God brought about a great victory there in a barley field. And by the grace of God, that's one of the things that this ministry will help churches do. When so many have compromised and run away from the conflict, we can again, by the grace of God, stand for the truth. And may God give us all victory. So that's the first little bit of background to the name Barleyfield. The second one comes from the book of Ruth. Barleyfield as a ministry is predominantly concerned with evangelism and early discipleship. And we have three flagship video-based courses which together fit into a single holistic strategy for evangelism and early discipleship. And we exist to help local churches and evangelistic ministries get access to world-class resources and use them in a well-implemented strategy. And if you'd like us to help you to do that, please click that Contact Us button, fill in your details, and we can start that conversation with you. So, reaching the lost, seeing them come to know Jesus as their Redeemer, is what we're all about. But we are concerned to help churches do their evangelism in such a way that it seamlessly shepherds the people making commitments into a powerful early discipleship process. Now, as I'm sure you know, Ruth was a foreigner. She was not an Israelite. She was not one of God's people. She was a Moabite. But because she had been married to an Israelite man who had now died, as a widow, she was now eligible for what the Bible called redemption. And that basically meant that one of her ex-husband's family members could marry her and raise up offspring in the name of her dead husband. The problem was, nobody wanted to do that because it meant the children wouldn't bear their name. But because she was hungry and poor, as all sinners actually need to be before they meet their Redeemer, she was gathering little bits of grain in the field of an older man named Boaz. And her mother-in-law, Naomi, basically said to her, Boaz is one of our relatives. Maybe he will redeem you. So that evening, Ruth went down to the barley field where Boaz was spending the night because it was the time of the barley harvest. And there, in that barley field that night, she met her Redeemer. And in fact, from their marriage, from their descendants, came King David and Jesus Christ himself, according to the flesh, who is the true Redeemer. So Barleyfield is not only a place of defending truth, but it's also a place for people to meet their Redeemer. And both of those things are very close to my heart. Then, the third significance of the name Barleyfield comes from the timing of the barley harvest in ancient Israel. As you get to know our resources, you're going to see that we do believe in a post-conversion baptism in the Holy Spirit and the ongoing operation of the gifts of the Spirit that brings with it. So our concern at Barleyfield, being evangelism and early discipleship, is very focused on that complex of events that took place 2,000 years ago, that began at the death of Jesus at the Passover and ended 7 weeks later at the day of Pentecost when the Holy Spirit was poured out. It's that 7 weeks as a block of time in history that gives meaning and power to everything we do here. And wouldn't you know it, the barley harvest in ancient Israel began at the Passover. And then together with the wheat harvest, it lasted, guess how long? 7 weeks. And at the end of that 7 weeks, when the full grain harvest had been brought in, they celebrated the harvest at the Feast of Weeks, as it was called in the Old Testament. The Greek name for the Feast of Weeks? Pentecost. Pentecost was the Thanksgiving feast for the ingathering of the wheat and barley harvest. So it was in this particular 7-week block of time between Passover and Pentecost that the barley harvest was brought in. And that's why, my friend, it's in the barley field, just like Boaz, that I want to be. And I'd love to labor there with you if you think we can be of assistance to your ministry or to your church. God bless you.